hell is a place within God. So I view it as a place where you are experiencing the presence of God, but you're so resistant to it because you're so still full of sin and full of your sinful nature and evil that you're resistant to God's presence, you're resistant to his love. But once you're able to give into his love, I think those gates are open, as Revelation says, and you can enter into the heaven state with God.
Okay. 1, 2, ready, go.
Welcome to the Called to Be Bad podcast. My name is Mariah Martin, and I feel called to be bad. It turns out I'm not the only one. Join us as we dig into all things bad, scandalous, deviant, the stuff that makes good church folks squirm in the sanctuary. Why? Well, because sometimes the scandalous is spiritual, deviant is divine, and bad is beautiful. Say yes to the call, and let's see what holy trouble we get into today. So what would you say would be a more accurate biblical description of hell?
Well, so
in your opinion.
yeah, thank you. Again, I don't want anyone to think that I'm a theologian here,
No,
but
it's fine.
from what I'm learning, I think of hell as essentially a purging fire. So in Revelation, it describes two locations. You have the lake of fire, which is positioned right outside of New Jerusalem, or essentially new creation, heaven on earth. So New Jerusalem is a point where heaven and earth have come back together, just like Eden once again, where the two realms have collided, and his kingdom is on earth. And then right outside the gates of the city is the second location, the lake of fire. And in the lake of fire, it says that death itself is thrown in the lake. It says that the beast, Satan, the false prophet, all of them are thrown into the lake. And it says that their armies are thrown into the lake. But one thing to keep in mind is that the gates to the city, it specifically says the gates to the city of New Jerusalem are never shut. They are always kept wide open. So my question is, who are those gates open for? Why don't we shut them? If these are two eternal locations where you cannot leave either one of them, then what's the purpose of these gates being open? What is John trying to tell us?
Right.
Not only that, but it says that in the city there are streams of water that will for anyone who is thirsty. Who in that city would be thirsty if they're already in God's presence? And it says that the church is within the city, constantly calling out to anyone outside, saying, "Come in and feast with us, dine with us, come into the presence of God." Who are they calling out to if they're stuck in the lake of fire for literally eternity? So to me, it paints a picture of people being able to enter in to the city, even if they're in the lake of fire. It's also important to note that when the Bible says that death itself, Satan, the beast, the false prophet, when it says that they're thrown in the lake, it specifically says they are thrown in forever and ever. But when it says that people are put in it, when it says that the armies are thrown in it, it changes the way it says it. It doesn't say forever and ever. It says they have a part in the lake. Now, if you want to argue that have their part means eternal, I suppose you can. But I feel like it's pretty open-ended to the idea that maybe that's why the gates are still wide open. Maybe it's a temporal thing. Paul says in, I think it's 1 Corinthians, he says that that on judgment day, we will be judged, our works will be judged. And he says that anyone who has built their works on Jesus as their cornerstone will receive a reward. But anyone who does not build their works off of Jesus, it says that their works will be burnt up. It says that they will suffer loss, but yet be saved. So he specifically says, anyone who has not built their lives on Jesus, yes, they will suffer loss and their works will be burnt up, but they still shall be saved. And you even have Jesus in one of his parables talking about how everyone shall be seasoned with fire. And he was talking in the direct context of salvation. So I feel like all of these things come together to paint a picture of hell being a place of essentially a phase of a relationship with God in which you are resisting his love, you're resisting his nature, and in that resisting, you are suffering. but at some point you're able to give in to his love. The sin is burnt away and the soul remains. If you ask people what hell is like, a lot of Christians will say, well, hell is the absence of God. Hell is being outside of God's presence. The problem with that is that I view God not as a person that I can be with. I view God as being itself. He is the wellspring of all being. He's not just a being like among other beings. He is being, you know? So I don't feel like you can be outside of his presence. Everything that exists has to exist within God. One thing I like to tell people that my pastor has taught me is that heaven is not a place where God lives. Heaven lives inside of God because God is all that is.
Wow.
So heaven has to exist within God. It is the place within God where that he has created for us to dwell with him. But it can't be a place that he lives, because then that would assume that God is small enough to be contained in something.
Oh.
So the same has to be said about hell. Hell is a place within God. So I view it as a place where you are experiencing the presence of God, but you're so resistant to it because you're so still full of sin and full of your sinful nature and evil that you're resistant to God's presence, you're resistant to his love and that does as Paul described, is suffering a loss. It is burning. As Jesus said, it is being seasoned with fire. So it's not anything pleasant. But once you're able to give into his love, I think those gates are open, as Revelation says, and you can enter into the heaven state with God.
Yeah. I've never thought about that as like God being contained in heaven, or like that
Mhm.
hell is something within God. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
new for me. That's new for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's hard to stomach when you have this idea that hell is a place of pure evil, because it's like, well, how can pure evil exist within him? But if you get away from that idea that hell is a place where you're literally being tortured just because God wants to punish you, and instead embrace a place where God is correcting, not just punishing, where God's justice is retributive or retributive. It is to correct. God is not punishing just for punishment's sake. He's not, vindictive and just wanting to pour out wrath on you because he's mad. What he's doing is correcting you for a purpose.
mhm.
What would be the purpose of corrective punishment or retributive justice if you're still stuck in there forever? It would be like there's unfinished business. It'd be like he's never fully dealt with sin. If you're stuck in hell forever, then the issue of sin has never fully been dealt with. The only way for it to be truly finished, as he said on the cross, it is finished, would be for there to be an end to that, where the punishment ends because you have learned, you have grown, and now you can enter into his presence.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I very much appreciate the idea of like if God is omnipotent, then God knows why we make the choices we do, and God knows what we need in order to make better choices,
Right.
choices that are or like what we need to be whole, to be healed. Um, and I think that that is within us all along.
Yeah.
As God is a part of us, like the fingerprint of the divine on each of us. So I like the idea of we are drawn to wholeness and health, and getting our needs met in God. And it's not like God is just like waiting and slowly twisting our arm. Like this is something that we choose, and that like we have eternity to decide.
Kind of like what I've heard before, that essentially the only people who stay in hell are the people. Okay, I'm gonna get called a heretic for this, but I've heard it said before that the only people who stay in hell are the people who want to be there. Essentially, that they are using their free will to say they'd rather be there. Now, who would rationally ever choose to be in hell? But again, if you get away from the idea that they're being literally tormented,
Right.
and just instead embrace the idea that hell is simply the resistance of God and his nature, and embracing your sinful nature, um, you can understand that there may be a time where in eternity, like you said, people may make that rational choice to instead embrace the love of God. Not that they're being forced to, but that
Mhm.
they choose to. The way that David Bentley Hart explained it, and his book was so so challenging to read, but so I might be not doing it justice. But one thing that he explained is that basically all of us, if we're rational, if we're thinking, if we're not unable to process things. So anyone who's rational is seeking after good for themselves. Even people who are doing evil things, in their mind, in their twisted way of thinking, they think this is good for me. This will benefit me in some way.
Yeah.
So whether we're going in the right direction or not, we're all in our own minds trying to seek after goodness. Well, true goodness itself is God. So really, when you think about it, all of us are, even if we don't realize it, attempting to find God because he is goodness. So I feel like in hell, in that state, you are stuck in a state where you're seeking what you think is goodness for yourself, but it's not. It's actually a lie. It's a deception, and it's not true goodness. And eventually, any rational free will person will, I think, say, this isn't working. Maybe I should change, and eventually give over to accepting true goodness and seek after that instead. And as they move closer, I think God welcomes them.
Yeah. So when I had a conversation with someone, and I was trying to explain that I don't believe in a literal hell, meaning fire and brimstone, eternal conscious torment, that didn't line up with my view of God and my view of salvation, or otherwise. And this person responded by saying, "Well, that devalues the work that Jesus did on the cross."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah.
And it puts down his death, his suffering.
Mm-hmm.
What is the point of him dying if it's not to save us from hell?
Yeah.
And to be honest, it hurt my feelings. I was
Oh, no.
like, are you saying that I don't believe in like the importance of the work Jesus did on the cross? Like, that's not at all what I was saying, but I didn't know how to respond.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you this question, and I realized that you answered it on your podcast, but I want you again to say what you said, because I thought it was really helpful. So how would have you responded if my friend had asked you this question?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, I get asked this all the time, and what I would try to explain is that we are not at all diminishing the cross. In fact, I view it as embracing and expanding on its power, basically highlighting its power even more. Because what we're essentially saying is that not only was the cross powerful enough to get you saved, it was powerful enough to save all of humankind. It was powerful enough to reconcile the entire creation to God. That we are not limiting his power at all. We are saying that Jesus is so powerful that he didn't just, allow himself to have a personal relationship with you, as evangelicals always say, you need a personal relationship. He didn't just do that. He defeated death itself. He defeated hell. So the cross is that point where Jesus forever defeats sin, death, hell, and the grave once and for all. And so I see that as a statement of its power. The Bible says that when Jesus dies and enters Gehenna, that he takes the keys of death, hell, and the grave. Now, what struck me on that was, if you well, years and years ago, I was an assistant manager at a GameStop, and when I worked there, I had the keys. But once you quit, you get the keys taken away. Whoever has the keys is in charge of it. Whoever has the keys controls that place. Well, and so once I got the keys taken away, I wasn't in charge anymore. So when Jesus takes the keys from hell, he is saying that hell is not in charge of hell anymore. He's saying that death is not in charge of death anymore, that there's a new manager. And my question is, if Jesus took the keys of death, hell, and the grave, what do you think he did with them? I think he used them. I think he uses them to set the captives free. And if Jesus took the keys to hell and then decided just to hold on to them and not use them and leave everyone locked in, then this change of management meant nothing. This change of management of who controls death completely is meaningless, because he's doing the same thing the previous owner did. So I think that Jesus set the captives free, that he reconciles all of creation to himself, because the cross is just that powerful. When he was on the cross, he had an opportunity right there to continue to perpetuate the sinful cycle of man of retaliation and vengeance and violence. He had the opportunity right there to say, call down fire, to cast everyone there into hell right then and there. But he said, forgive them. And when he said that, the cross defeated this sin cycle of retaliation and vengeance. And that, I think, speaks to its power. It kind of reminds me of Noah's Ark, where in the story of Noah's Ark, it's supposed to be the story of God attempting to cleanse the world of evil. But as we know, evil lived on because Noah, once he got off the ark, he cursed his children, he cursed his sons. And so it's showing that even after this cleansing, evil still lived on. Now we compare that to Jesus, where after his cleansing of the earth, he doesn't do what Noah did. He decides forgiveness. That breaks the power of sin and death. That's why we can now say death has no sting. Paul says, death, where's your sting? Grave, where's your victory? It's been swallowed up by Jesus on the cross.
Yeah. I appreciate this view that it's not like either or, and that this option devalues the work, that it's like, no, we're blowing this up. We are appreciating all the ways that Jesus and his work on the cross, and not only his work on the cross, but his work in his life and his teachings, in his death, in his resurrection, in the coming of the Holy Spirit. All of that was salvific. It's salvific now, and it's salvific then, and it's salvific in the future. Like eternity starts now.
Exactly.
And so it's just so much bigger than like Jesus saved us from our personal sins and reconciled us personally to God. It's bigger than that. It's that and
exactly. I mean, look at the Revelations where actually it might have been one of Paul's letters, but in the Bible it describes how at new creation, when heaven comes to earth at the end of this age, it says that Jesus essentially presents all of creation to God, and that God is then made all in all. And so the way I see it, we are all God's image bearers. We are all pieces of his image. And so how can he be made all in all if his own image is not complete, if his own image bearers are not fully present? When he says that Jesus reconciles all of creation, presents it to God so he can be made all in all, I see that as this beautiful, inclusive picture of reconciling the entire world and everyone in it to him, so that his image is made complete once again, that everyone comes together. And I don't see how we can really call him all in all if his own image is shattered by much of us being in punishment forever.
Right. Why would we even want to believe that? Why would we want to believe that there's some people that get left behind? I mean, I think that kind of devalues the work of Jesus and God, that like, okay, so like God can't meet the needs of all people. God can't save everyone.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Exactly. That's what I would say too, respectfully to your friend, of course. I would say, well, maybe you're the one devaluing the cross. I don't know how to say that without coming off as an arrogant jerk.
Well, I mean, I think that there is honestly, okay, how do I say this?
See, it's hard to say it without,
Well, okay, so I think there is like an inherent arrogant stance saying like, yes, I will be saved and you won't. And here's why. I hold the truth and you do not. I know Jesus, I know God better than you do. Yeah, so kind of this savior mentality of like, I am saved and you are not. And it is my job to save. I told my church when I became pastor, I said, just so you know, like I am not in the business of saving souls. That is not my job. That is God's job. That is not my job. And kind of wanted that to open up like my view of salvation, that it's not like a ticket to heaven or fire insurance.
And isn't that so much more freeing in so many ways, to embrace the finished work of Jesus on the cross instead of thinking that his last words on the cross were, get to work. It's instead that, no, Jesus finished this. He defeated death once and for all. And now we're just commanded to spread that good news that, hey, good news, death is defeated. Not that I need to rescue you or that you have to think just like me. The fact is, it's defeated. And yes, we still bodily die. Everyone dies, but we're promised that it won't sting. People ask me what happens when you die. And I say, well, it's kind of complicated, but one thing I can tell you is it won't sting, because whatever happens, to be absent of bodies, to be present with Jesus. And one way or another, I believe that all shall be saved.
Yeah. And like, if you think about it, like Jesus on the last night, if Jesus knew he was going to die, which it seemed like he did, how did he spend his last hours? He
Mhm.
wasn't going out evangelizing, saying like, you must follow me, you must believe in me. I'm going to save you. Uh,
Mhm.
and maybe some could argue, well, that happened on the cross. And so, but
Yeah.
I think that Jesus saved people before he died.
Yeah.
And what did he do? He washed feet. He broke
Yeah.
bread with his friends and he washed feet. How many feet could we wash as
Yeah.
Christians if we laid aside this idea that we need to save souls, that it is our
Mhm.
job to, give people fire insurance? Like, how many
Yeah.
feet could we wash if we let that task aside and recognize that that is so much bigger than us? Uh,
Yeah. It's a beautiful picture in those last days of what Jesus was trying to communicate, which was not warn everyone about how we're going to punish them forever.
yes.
It was love them, serve them, be with them.
Mhm.
One of the core values at my church that we say all the time is that people will never come to our altars unless we first invite them to our tables. And so
Mm,
what we're saying is that
love that.
you need to have this Eucharistic lifestyle of all coming together at the table to dine, to break bread, and to eat together, to just be friends, and
Yeah.
that is the ministry of reconciliation that Paul says that we are called into. Um, that is how we reconcile people to God, is by coming together at a table instead of preaching a fire and brimstone, get down to the altar message.
Right. And I think the key word that you said at the beginning was invite. It
Yeah,
wasn't threaten. It
yeah,
wasn't say
exactly.
this or else. You better do this or else you're going to be burning. It's an invitation. Come eat.
Hmm.
Come break bread with me. Um,
Yeah.
I'm curious. I ask most people on the show when it seems appropriate, but how would you respond to someone who said that you were a bad Christian, or throw around the word heretic,
Hmm.
because of your view of hell?
you know there's how I would want to respond initially, and then hopefully better judgment would weigh out and I would not respond that way.
Fair.
I actually have experience with this because on my TikTok I've had people call me everything from heretic to antichrist.
Wow.
I've gotten people have like tracked me down to my Instagram or Facebook even, which I don't even put my Facebook out there because I don't get on it much, but they track me down, send me messages about how I'm sending people to hell.
Mm,
So it's not fun,
yeah.
but yeah, luckily, I mean, luckily the good comments and the positive things outweigh the bad tremendously, but still, it's not fun. I even had one TikToker make a whole 4-part series all about me being a heretic. And he had like 3 times the amount of viewers or followers that I have, so that wasn't fun. Um, but how I responded was just to basically ignore it, honestly. If I was face to face with them, I would have tried to tell them, like, it's okay to think differently. That doesn't make us not family. I would have told them, you can't be a gatekeeper of faith, saying only people who think just like me and believe just like me on all of these points are allowed into our faith. You need to instead welcome everyone, be inclusive, and allow for difference of opinion. That's okay.
Mhm.
It doesn't make anyone a bad Christian to just disagree about theology. It just makes us human Christians. Um, so that's what I would try to say to them. But honestly, what I mostly do is just try to ignore it.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, haters, they're gonna, and trolls, they're gonna help the algorithm. They're gonna bring
yeah,
people to, you're gonna say, thank you for drawing attention. The
yeah,
person
it's
that made
true.
that TikTok account, like, people probably went and watched your videos.
That's
And
true.
who knows how many people saw them that wouldn't have otherwise if they wouldn't have made, this hater account. So
That's true. That's
haters
true.
gonna hate, as T
Yeah,
said,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
yeah.
But it is sad though to see this idea that, well, I don't even claim the title of a progressive Christian. I don't know if you might. I don't know, but I don't claim that title because I don't really like labels that much.
Sure.
But it's so sad to see whether I am a progressive Christian or not. It's sad to see this backlash and this hatred that people have for progressives and for deconstructing Christians, because I want to tell them that, you know, we're still family. Like you shouldn't be throwing people out of the feast just because we disagree on a few things.
Yeah.
Recently in the news, Kevin Max from DC Talk announced that he's deconstructed out of evangelicalism, which I thought was fascinating because I used to love DC Talk as a kid. And immediately I see the articles and the comments on the articles on social media of people just being horrible to him and
Right.
making the meanest comments. And it's like he's not even an atheist. Not that that would defend what they're doing at all. Of course, it'd still be horribly wrong if he was an atheist. But it's like, guys, he's still even a Christian, and you're treating him like garbage. I
Mhm.
just I don't really have a hot take on it to give you. I just think it's so sad to see, and
Yeah.
I hate it every time it happens.
Right. Yeah. There has to be some room for like room for questions, room
Mhm.
for doubt, and that doubt is not the opposite of faith. Um,
Yes, exactly.
yeah.
I love in the story of Thomas how he was doubting the resurrection of Jesus. When he was doubting that Jesus rose from the dead, God didn't punish him.
Right.
Jesus didn't yell at him, and the other disciples also didn't cast him out and say, "Well, you're not really one of us."
Right.
They still were in the same room with him. They were talking. They were still friends. And
Yeah.
then when Jesus showed up, he didn't show up and yell at him. He showed up and answered his questions. He
Yeah.
said, oh, Thomas specifically said, I will not believe until I have touched the nail wounds myself and put my hand in his side. And so Jesus showed up and said, oh, is that what you need? Okay, here, do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So his answer to questioning is not to punish, it's to answer. His answers to doubt is, okay, here I am.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that God is not as intimidated by our doubts or our questions as we think he is.
Yeah. Like
Yes.
the idea of like Jacob wrestling with the angel or wrestling with God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think that that's a beautiful view of like and like Abraham arguing with God.
Mhm.
I think that
Yeah.
it's okay to ask questions. If that makes me a progressive Christian, okay.
Mhm.
But I think it's good to push back. I think Jesus would have loved that.
Absolutely.
Like you said, we see him interact with people, we see him ask questions, and I think he wanted that engagement. And so I don't think that that ends when, at the end of the canon, I think we're still supposed to wrestle. Uh,
Yes, I totally agree with you.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that is just fundamentalism. When fundamentalism rose in the United States, it was this idea that we have to have an answer ready for every question. The apologetics movement kicked off. It was this idea that we don't want to be humiliated. I mean, a lot of that apologetics movement came after the Scopes monkey trial, and they were like, we don't want to get humiliated again, so we have to be ready with an answer for everything. And so that led into this very rigid model of like, we can't admit that there are some things we don't know. We have to have an answer.
Yeah.
So embracing mystery was thrown out and instead cast out as being bad faith or not having faith. So
Right.
instead of embracing mystery, it was, well, we better have an answer. And I think that's done us a lot of damage.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and like part of my role as a pastor, like I never, when I stand in the pulpit, like I will say perhaps my opinions or beliefs. But mostly I want to like raise questions and provide resources and provide different perspectives and encourage people to think critically.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say you must believe this, because how many, like, do you really want to have a conversation with someone who thinks that they know better and that you need to
Yeah.
believe what they believe? Like, no, I don't want to go to a church who is like, oh, I'm gonna slowly pull
Mhm.
them over to my side. Like
Right. Right.
that's not fun. And so
Yeah.
I have no energy for apologetics. Like
Mhm.
I just want to talk and ask questions and break bread together, man. And if that
Exactly.
makes me a heretic and a progressive Christian, and if that's a dirty word, so be it.
I think that's beautiful, honestly. I think that that is a much more welcoming, and I think that's the model of Christianity that needs to be reintroduced for a lot of people, because we are seeing this deconstruction movement where people are losing their faith altogether because they're fed up with the version of Christianity that we have been preaching. And I
Right.
don't think the problem is with faith or with Jesus, it's been with the way we're presenting it.
Yeah.
And, even things like hell that we just talked about, I'm not saying that I'm completely 100% right. I'm not saying I'm an expert. And I'm also not saying that anyone has to, like, you have to agree with me.
Yeah.
I'm just simply saying, this is where I'm at. This is what I've read.
Yeah.
I've read a few books and I talked to some friends and it's what made sense to me. And, I'm happy to get to share it, but but
Yeah.
people can think whatever they want.
Right. And I think that there's this kind of reputation for people who have deconstructed or more progressive Christians, that they then like don't have any beliefs or convictions, that it's all kind of like wishy-washy, like whatever goes. And that is, at least with people that I have interacted with, that's not the case. Like most people I interact with that have deconstructed have firm values and beliefs, but there is that question of, or there is this posture perhaps of like, I could be wrong. Like, what if I am wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Or this like, yes, and like, yes, I believe this, and I am open to correction. I'm open to hearing more perspectives, and if my life experience clashes with my values, with my beliefs, you know, then I'm going to hold that intention and see where we go from there.
Yeah.
But it's not this like, oh, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh,
Maybe,
I gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any final advice for anyone who wants to expand their view of hell, or, you know, is entering into this process of deconstructing, of saying like, I'm not sure if I'm on board with eternal conscious torment? And
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing to note is that, back at the start of this, I mentioned there's three different ways to look at hell. Know that there is a lot more nuance to those three views. There's a lot more to get into. So don't take what I'm saying here as like your final word on how this all works. Like, please study and look into it. I've had people send me messages about like, oh, I've learned so much from your TikToks. I'm thinking that's awesome, but they're only like a minute long. So please keep going.
yeah.
So my advice would be to study this out. Maybe you fall more in line with the annihilationist view that I mentioned, or whatever. There are some books I could recommend. There's, like I mentioned before, an author named David Bentley Hart, a philosopher and theologian. He wrote a book called That All Shall Be Saved. There's N.T. Wright has another view, kind of a bit different from his. He's not a universalist. So if you're wanting a different take on hell that isn't universalism, there's Surprised by Hope by N.T. Wright. And then, honestly, a much easier book to maybe get people started that isn't quite so academic is Brian Zahn's book, Sinners in the Hands of a Loving God. That's a great way to kind of get you started, I think. And of course, you mentioned earlier, Love Wins by Rob Bell. So all of these are great works that can help get you thinking a little differently than eternal conscious torment. Not even all of them are universalist. They're not. But all of them will just get you kind of asking questions about eternal conscious torment and start to maybe get you thinking in the right direction about maybe this isn't what the Bible actually tried to say. And from there, my advice would be just embrace mystery. We don't have to understand it perfectly right now. We can admit like, hey, there are some things I don't understand about what happens in heaven and hell. There are some things that I don't fully get about what happens when you die. And you know what? That's okay. I don't think God wants us to have right beliefs as much as he wants us to have faith. Faith is more important than having all the answers correct. So just give yourself some grace, and also have have a humble approach of like, maybe I'm wrong about this, and start reading, I guess.
And I think also if you're like just deconstructing, especially if you come from an evangelical tradition, I think any of Rachel Held Evans' books,
yes,
Searching for Sunday, those are really great places to start. I think she's amazing.
Yes. Oh, I love Rachel Held Evans. Her book, Faith Unraveled, was like one of the things that ministered to me so deeply. Because when I started to deconstruct, not just hell, but all sorts of things, like things like the rapture, for instance, and lots of topics, I began to feel really lonely because I was like the only one, I felt like, who was having these questions, just to admit to people like, hey, what if creationism isn't it? What if I believe in evolution? And to get like the harsh response, I felt alone. And her book, Faith Unraveled, showed me that I wasn't alone, and it ministered to me deeply.
Oh my goodness. And also, so Rachel Held Evans passed. Now it's been a year. Right? Yeah, a year. I think.
I think it's 2 years actually.
Or is it 2 now?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But I know that the anniversary passed, so I couldn't remember if it was 1 or 2 years. But she reads her audiobooks. So I have an app, Hoopla, where you can get library books. So you don't have to like go and buy the Audible or whatever. And she reads her books. So like having a piece of her, like having her voice still is like so special to me.
Wow. I'm
So I
gonna have
highly recommend her audiobooks. But don't
yeah.
do it when you're driving, because that's what I did. I did it on a road trip and I had to pull over because I was like sobbing because it's just so
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I mean, Faith Unraveled had me tearing up a ton of times, so I wouldn't recommend it either.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um Great. Well, it's tradition to end with a blessing, and I think you have a kitten that might also
Yes,
need a blessing. So if you want to grab,
sure. Hello.
hey, there we go.
Yes.
Oh, and before we get in the blessing, I remembered I wanted to say another resource for learning more about hell is the Joey's podcast, All Things Reconsidered.
Oh yeah.
I watched it on YouTube, which is fun because you see you and your co-host talking it out, and you can find that anywhere you find podcasts. And then also if you have TikTok, Joey Trieb on Trieb, right? Yeah,
Yes, you got it.
on TikTok. So yeah, Joey, and what is your kitten's name?
So her name is Luna.
Luna. I have a chicken named Luna.
Oh really?
Yeah, it's
Oh, she's
based
feisty.
on oh look at, oh my gosh. Is that at all based on Sailor Moon by any chance?
No, I am familiar with the show, and you know, but no, it's actually from Luna Lovegood from Harry Potter.
Oh yeah. This
Yeah.
is Luna from Sailor Moon. That's
Oh, nice.
the namesake for my chicken. Anyways,
Yeah.
Joey and your feisty kitten Luna, and I think you see an orange cat in the background.
Yes, that's Chloe.
And Chloe. And all you viewers and listeners, may you go from this podcast feeling wrapped in grace and the love of a God who meets our needs and wants to be near to us. And may you go out with questions and mystery, and may you be fed with the desire to learn more about heaven, hell, all the things. So,
Yes.
all things reconsidered. Eh?
Yeah, right. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Amen. Yeah.
Thank
Thank you, Joey, for being on here and for sharing from all your wisdom and all your knowledge. This is awesome.
Well, thank you for having me. I don't know how wise I am, but thank you. It's really been fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I'll have to keep watching your show because this is really a great thing that you're doing. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, I'll see everybody next time.
All right, see ya.
That's all for this episode of Called to Be Bad. Keep being your bad, beautiful selves, and I will see you next time.